Percent of the time, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
It's not. It
gets the people going.
You're now listening to Diagnonsense.
Look at all this damage!
With Justin Pendergrass and Kurt Honak.
You are a sad, strange little man.
Then we would just be idiots saying nonsense.
I got to tell you guys this story, though, okay? So I was at a training yesterday, doing this training with a bunch of youth at a camp out in Willow. And I'm just sitting in the back waiting for my turn, and all these kids are walking in, and they all have different color bandanas to, like, make up their team groups.
Like Survivor?
Yeah. And, you know, around my house building, if somebody's got, a bandana, we always tell them to tuck it, even if it's not a gang thing. We just don't allow them to be sporting those kind of things because it could be a gang thing.
Right.
So I'm always telling people to tuck their flags, and these kids walk in and they all sit down and they have like different colors of flags. And I was like, oh, this is probably gang related. And just joking to myself. Right. And the first thing that the guy at the beginning, he says, hey guys, some quick housekeeping. I have to say this, and I don't know why I have to say this, but you guys are not allowed to pull knives on each other. Even if he says, even if you're joking. And I was like, yep, it's gang related. It's no. And I think it was like he was over exaggerating the situation, or maybe even making up what was going on. But it was hilarious to me because that's where my mind went, was gang activity. And then he says, you're not allowed to pull knives.
Confirmation bias.
Confirmation. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in to Diagnonsense. I'm your host, Justin Pendergrass, here with my co-host, Kurt Honak. How you doing, Kurt?
Doing great.
Yeah, man. What are we going to talk about today?
Housekeeping is what we're going to talk about today. So honestly, I don't have anything. This is such a lull because I just got back from the DC trip, and then I have like 3 weeks before I'm taking a week and a half off. And
then why did you interrupt me?
Well, because International Overdose Awareness Day is on the 31st of
there
August,
we go.
Which is this month. And it's at Nunley Park right here by the building, and you should come. And also, don't forget that Redemption and My Voice are on hiatus, but they'll be back in like a month and a half. And also, My House Podcast just released an episode talking about the DC trip. And okay, that's everything I got.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for making that quick.
You're welcome.
Housekeeping was designed just so Isaac had a reason to talk during every single podcast.
Yes. You're not wrong.
It's his idea.
It was my idea. It's all my idea.
It's all my idea. What are we talking about, Kurt, before Isaac rudely interrupted with housekeeping?
There's a couple things. Michelle was talking to me about theory of planned behavior during her trip in DC. So I assume that they had some kind of panel or something where they were talking about this and it was relevant.
What is that? Can you explain that so that people like myself who didn't read the article that you sent me?
Well, I'm trying to understand it myself, right?
Interesting.
There are some like some of these people I'm familiar with through college, but overall, basically they're talking about, a certain amount of predictability in behavior based on attitude, subjective norm, perceived behavioral control, and your intention. And how if the three major factors are the attitude, subjective norm, and perceived behavioral control. From how I'm reading this, they've got this broken down into like
a graph,
a mathematical.
Yeah, like that's where it lost me. I was like, why is there math in my psychology?
Right.
What's going on?
Well,
it's like, why are there letters in my math?
They're trying to make math make sense and tell our kids why they have to know math after high school.
But
that's a government plot.
Yeah.
So with these factors, they're saying, if you combine these and in a certain way, there's like the behaviors, you can predict a certain outcome for behavior, essentially.
So they can mathematically figure out how I'm going to respond if, let's say, that my wife was in a car accident.
That's what it's saying.
So, well, that's very interesting.
Right.
Because I feel like any of us could kind of have a good guess. My first response would be, oh my gosh, I'm worried about my wife.
Well, yeah, well, it'd be subjective norm. So like, what is the social perception? So, when we're thinking, anytime we use our brain, right, to think about like an action we take, we weigh, there's a certain amount of our brain that has a heuristic, right, for like what the perceived social outcome of that would be. And so the brain is basically the supercomputer that's making these decisions about like what are the percentage of like, what is the outcome, odds are that this will be a good decision if I project this out. And it's really interesting because if you think about like REM sleep, I've read studies on REM sleep and read about like how like in when we have our rapid eye movement sleep, we dream and stuff like that. That's like our brain is like running simulations for like things that happen.
Well, actually, Kurt, I just watched Doctor Strange 2, and our dreams are just ourselves from other timelines. So I don't know if that's right. Because according to Doctor Strange 2, it's just ourselves from different realities.
Well, I mean,
that's witchcraft. No.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a take. Okay.
I guess. You know what's interesting about this? I know this is a sci-fi tangent, but like since we're on the subject of StarCraft, how like the different like species have like psychic capability, and so my theory on that is like, if you get exposed to a certain amount of radiation, you'll grow a brain lobe that taps into like metaphysical.
Kurt's just standing next to like open nuclear reactors, like, I'm gonna be the next Professor X.
It's stranger things have happened though, right? But no,
look, if you could guarantee that I'd get a superpower by doing something like that, I'd be in line.
Right.
Yeah, I can guarantee you're gonna like get stage 4 brain cancer instantly and die.
Sure. But I said if you could guarantee that I could get a superpower. Show me the math.
Show me the math.
Show me the math. Okay, so when you were talking about this theory of planned behavior thing, right, Kurt, does this even take into account the fight, flight, or freeze like responses when somebody's in traumatic experiences? Because I feel like, and I could be wrong, but somebody who's in imminent crisis,
right,
they're unpredictable.
Well, that's one of actually, I was just reading some of the criticisms and I'm new to this. This is something that I'm like, still reading about, because I have my criticisms about regular behavioral theory that I've learned in college that's older, but that's one of the criticisms I was reading about was like, how do you factor in like the pre-existing conditions for like, because what if somebody's under like extreme duress and like they're not going to make a rational decision. But a part of me thinks that the way that behavioral theory works is not so much based on like, it's based on like what can be predicted. And so like a part of me thinks that this is more like, what is the, what's the greatest sort of like equation we can make to predict what's within predictability in terms of behavioral responses. But I do have a problem with that, right? Because like you say, where's the margin of error? Because if you're talking 1% margin of error on, which seems like would be great. Like, let's say we have a theory of behavior that predicts 100, like 99%, reliability. It's like, well, 1% of decisions over the course of thousands of decisions is a large margin of error. You know what I mean? Like if you extrapolate that out, or if you extrapolate that out into critical decisions that could be species ending, that could be pretty serious screw up, right? Like,
I mean, how many decisions do we make in a day?
Right.
Right.
Like, would you consider stepping one step at a time forward a decision?
No.
I would. Because you have the decision to stop walking or continue walking. Isaac, you're wrong.
See, this is
Everything that you do is a decision.
I don't like this.
Everything that you
I
do.
don't like this.
Come on, let's go deep, bro.
Well, but then it's like, so to your point, Kurt, if we can predict people's behavior to a 99% like ratio,
Yeah.
it to me, it's like the butterfly effect, right? Because as soon as you get one of those decisions wrong, it puts you down a completely different track, and then you have to start predicting that, and then there's another slight
Multiverses.
And the problem I have with this is it doesn't take in account to the human fallibility, right? Like human beings are not perfect. So
can it predict that you're going to do something irrational though? I mean, like humans don't always make rational decisions, but is there in the math, is there a way that it shows that you making a suboptimal choice is actually what it expects you to do?
Well, I think you can make that argument, because if the subjective norm, so if the social perception of the action is good, even though it's not, and if your attitude towards the action is good for the wrong reasons, and your perceived behavioral control over the action is high, even if that's a super evil decision, I guess you're more likely to make that decision. You know what I mean? Well, it depends on your intention too. If your intention is to not make a bad decision, I guess that factors in.
I feel like we need an example.
Yeah.
Because I'm still struggling to grasp it a little bit.
They used the video that I saw on it was talking about your decision to buy a new cell phone. So if your attitude towards buying
I
a new
don't
cell
want to buy a
phone-
new cell phone. It's too expensive.
Well, yeah, but let's say your attitude towards buying a new one was good because you had one that was failing.
Okay.
The subjective norm was everybody's buying cell phones, and people are like, hey, you should try out this one because this has a bunch of features that your old one doesn't. So you're receiving positive social feedback. And let's say you have money set aside for a cell phone, your control over the situation is already high. And so and the phone allows you to become transhumanist and one of the factors is perceived behavioral control, right? So maybe the cell phone's got a new feature that allows you to, I don't know, our cell phones have so many features and they're adding more all the time. And let's say it has the next best thing. I don't know what that was. A minute ago it was touch screens, right? Tomorrow it could be holographic, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm down for holographic.
Yeah. So let's say it's holographic. Your likelihood to
I'm buying a new cell phone.
Buy the new cell phone is
It
statistically
just taps
high.
into your mind and
So
does
what
what
if-
you tell it to do without saying anything.
We
Isaac.
are the product.
We've said that on a podcast already.
So what if my cell phone is failing and the social norm is to buy a new cell phone, but I don't have the money set aside? What happens with the math?
Well, I could say that that's a simple fraction, but they actually have it broken down into that's where it gets complicated, and where I haven't read more of the science is where they're saying, there's actually
This
a
sounds
equation for there's the three factors, right? There's a formula on here.
This is the problem
And
when
it's
you put math into things that are not number based, because this
Well,
sounds
it's
a lot
algebra.
like This sounds a lot like utils in economic theory.
Yeah.
Where it's okay, you get 1 util out of eating an apple, but I get 5 utils out of crushing an entire can of salt and vinegar Pringles. So I'm going to choose to crush a can of salt and vinegar Pringles because I get 5 utils. But what is a util? It has no meaning. It is completely subjective. It literally doesn't mean anything. It's just a way to show that I enjoy this one thing more than I enjoy the other thing. And that's you can make the equation. This is the problem that I have, is you could make the equation say whatever you want it to, but when you're using numbers that are just completely made up and subjective, I feel like there's always going to be some error there. You're never going to be able to perfectly apply this.
And so the major problem I have with this is that they're talking about applying this to voting theory. And to me, it's so you're basically that means that people, which we all kind of understand, but that you're like people are planning based on behavioral model theories, how people are voting, and they're making market decisions based on that. And it's like at some point, right, you get into this gray area where it's like, well, there's 1% margin of error, but like we can see that applying things in the history, like behavioral health, like, so if we have a 1% margin of error on, I don't know, say something like antidepressants, what does that look like if you have 1% of people that have an adverse response to antidepressants? And I'm bringing that up, right, because I have another article that I want to talk about. But
right. I mean, that's because if you have 99 people, I guess that
are fine,
but you like totally
One
jack up
person's
one
not.
person, it's
Yep.
not. That's not a great ratio. Still.
well, especially not if it makes them suicidal or something, you know.
Well, their argument is it's a 99% success rate, is how they would
Right,
say
is
that.
how that's
But
counted.
then when you're testing,
I guess it depends on how catastrophic. Are you just gonna muck that chocolate right into the mic?
I'm sorry. I have my dark chocolate this morning.
fix it in post, Isaac. Look,
I don't know if I can fix that in post. I mean,
It's
I could
unfixable, it's
edit this
broken.
whole thing out, but I need gonna be more validated if I leave it
Sorry.
in. So anyway, it's okay. Justin took his jacket off like 6 minutes ago into his mic, so it's fine.
okay.
And I drank coffee
Look,
into mine. We're killing it.
I
this
did my
morning.
best to not make it loud, but it's a jacket, and
So-
these mics are incredible.
So getting back on track, I guess it depends on how catastrophic that failure of the 1% is. Like if you have a 99% success rate where it completely solves those people's problems, and the 1% like is slightly below average, then maybe it's more of a justification. But if it's like 99 people perfectly fine, 1% instant death, then you have to kind of take more of a look at it. I mean, it seems like when we're talking about predicting human behavior, like I think, because the other thing is that there are certain individuals whose brains do not function on the same level as like the rest of society, like people with mental illness or with, various, or like even people that have like, what is it where the middle of your brain is split and basically your left brain and right brain are operating independently. Like there's all sorts of like weird things that can happen to your like
Yeah, I know.
robot,
I've heard of that.
your bone exoskeleton covered in meat with a like organic computer sitting inside your skull. Like there's all sorts of weird stuff that can happen when you have that going on. And so like, I wonder how this like,
So let's say the 1% of the population, right?
I was going to talk about serial killers.
Oh,
because
were
I've been
you?
listening to true crime. But
Oh,
like
God.
what? So we're going back to the cell phone thing. But now the cell phone is not murdering a bunch of people. So the social norm is don't kill people. That's bad. And the like, I guess not the money in this situation, but like the negative consequences are you're going to go to jail or get killed like for the rest of your life. And the only thing that like is valued is that they just like to kill people. And so like then depending on how like those people that are like serial killer tendencies, like have no empathy, like at that point, does the equation just shift? And now they only value like what gives them like joy or pleasure, and they just discount all other social.
Right. You're talking about like somebody who doesn't factor in social norms. Yeah, that would be, well, that's interesting because I guess it would reduce the factors in the equation and make them more predictable, right?
I think that we have
Maybe.
to figure out what's social norm nowadays, though, because I would argue that I have no idea.
You have no idea what the social norms are.
Not anymore. I thought I had some sort of grasp on that.
I think
but
it depends on. It depends on who you're with.
Well-
I think it depends on how you're raised. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
Right. So then what's the social norm? Right, because
Not
for me,
killing anyone is a good social norm.
right, that's a great
We'll
example.
start there.
Let's start with don't kill people, and we'll work our way down.
Okay.
And for that, it's a great thing. But let's say the social norm is that they're arguing that the social norm is everyone loves tacos.
Well, that is the social norm, Justin.
Right.
Why are you not? Are you trying to go against that?
But there are people who don't.
Well, those people are wrong.
Again, but that's my argument, right? Because they have to show me the standard of what social norm is in these things that they're talking about.
Yeah, that is
then.
interesting.
Because
so
I don't know what that standard is to
you
them.
Don't put math in. I feel like
Well-
Mr. Incredible. Math is math. Math is math. Like
So,
it's not only subjective for the individual that they're
Right.
looking at. It's
Right.
subjective for whoever is applying the equation.
Which makes it very hard to like maybe and where you could get concrete with this is like if you poll like 50% of people, and let's say they were true to what they put in their survey.
Let's pull 100% of people, Kurt, because at 100% with 1% being the error,
Right.
that's 78 million individuals. That's what I just found. I looked that up just now.
in the world.
In the world, out of the 7.8, I think it's billion.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, then that's a huge like if
78
you're-
million is that's a catastrophe.
Well, if you're trying to get 100% accuracy, it's just like with the voting thing, right? So if only 60% of people agree, like let's say you use this in voting, right? And like you find out who the candidate is who's going to win because they have a 60% likelihood to win. That means that does that mean that people disagree, like both, potentially both groups disagree on a certain percentage of issues, and you're not playing to the fact that you're trying to get 100% agreement on one candidate. You're trying to exploit the differences for the political system. And so to me, that's like, okay, so instead of we're now looking at behavior like, okay, instead of trying to, even out the differences, we're exploiting the differences by, we have a mathematical equation.
Well,
we know how much we can get away with
And now
on
you're
a voting
talking
base.
about the polarization of like the political system,
Yeah.
especially in America.
Yeah.
That is certainly a factor because you're right. It does incentivize people to like.
Well, it's just like business, right?
Right.
Like, why would I spend extra money if I could hedge my bets here and make a calculated decision on the political atmosphere? And see, but it's not 100%. That's where I have problems with it. It's like, even though it might accurately predict like which candidate's going to win, that doesn't accurately predict the future, because 1%, if like a small percent of people disagree on something and that turns out to be a bigger issue down the road, it's like this just is a snapshot of what people agree on in that moment, but that's going to change.
If the people that disagree are the ones that or if the ones that agree are leading us down the worst timeline, then
Well, because it's a social norm, but it's all, because like you say, it's all relative. It's like
that'll change. It just changes so fast. It can change on a dime
because the 99% might not show up to vote. They might have that opinion, they just might not show up.
Well, I think
right.
I think someone a lot smarter than us that like studies this for their entire job probably
for their
would
entire
say-
job.
for their
It's all
entire
they
job
do.
would probably say that out of the 99% that agree, they can predict that X
Yeah.
amount of percent is going to show up, and then X
right. But
it's a little more. We're trying to simplify it down a little bit, just as a concept, and I'm sure it's a lot more in depth than that. But
right.
it's still like it.
It's incomplete, but that's enough for people to make business decisions on, though.
Right.
That's what's scary, right?
What's
It's like
what's scary to me is that I think that people with just as much of a limited knowledge as I have about this concept right now are using it to make decisions, and that is what scares me because I barely understand it.
They're just like, get the scientist over here. What does he say about what people are going to vote? Okay,
I'm
well,
basing all of my decisions moving forward off of this.
Yes.
Should
that
I
is
go
what's
watch
scary.
this movie? Let me check.
get the sociologist over here.
I gotta do some
sociology math.
What's going to make our shareholders happy? Get the sociologist over here. That's what this feels like, right?
I don't like that. I do not like that at all.
Well, and that's why I have a problem. Like I'm reading it and I'm studying it, but just like and another thing is just like regular and any other science changes too. Like, you know, we don't use like, you know, we understand Pavlov and we understand like, you know, the older psychologists and like behavioral health models, but like we've learned so much since that was. So if you have a flawed behavioral health theory like today to like use that to like in the world, it's like, yeah, but like what if 10 years from now we're like, yeah, we were completely wrong, and like then we were already actively influencing the world in a way.
We're already dealing with the fallout of that from multiple things in this field.
Yeah.
So like what's gonna be the next thing, you know, in 10 years? What are we going to look back on?
Well, the next thing's going to be the other article that Kurt was going to bring up.
Yeah. I think we should.
That definitely gives.
So let's wrap this.
Let's roll into
concept.
that.
Let's wrap this concept as a final point to our discussion on behavioral theory. What is our takeaway from this? What is our messaging moving forward on behavioral theory, predictable human behavioral theory?
I'm interested in knowing more, I think that I would like to read more about what this is. I want to see from both sides what the conversation is. I'm not like sold, but I'm going to use it for everything now.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great.
I think that there has to be a certain amount of leeway for the human soul in any kind of behavioral health theory. And that's my problem with behavioral health, is that I feel like you're trying to map out like something, you know, that a human being has a certain set of statistical, you know, like planned behavioral movements. And it's like, well, you know, what about people change? You know, people change, people experience. It's all relative and
soul?
subjective.
What about
and
free will?
Right.
What about faith?
Right.
How do you factor faith into that?
I'm sure that someone that is a lot smarter than us that studies this for their entire life would tell us exactly how they factor faith into it. But
I'm just how do you predict that?
Right.
Because I mean, I'll go church on you real quick, but like because I've seen things that are very unpredictable through my faith.
Right.
Stuff that shouldn't have happened the way that it did, because it just did happen that way. My wife was driving her car this week and it broke down. The steering system completely like just ripped out of where it was supposed to be, and the car tire made a hard left turn. It's sitting sideways. She was just going 60 miles an hour down KGB and pulled into my driveway at less than 5 miles an hour, and that's where it broke. So that's like a miracle, first of all, because if she would have been driving 60 miles an hour and her car did that,
KGB.
She drives this Chevy Spark, she would have rolled.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that, like, how do you factor in that situation into this? Because I mean, I know it's not a behavioral situation.
Well, that's not a behavioral situation, but something.
But my faith, after that, my response to the situation, how do you factor in what I'm going to respond to that situation?
Well,
is what
I
I was getting at.
That because you value your faith, then you're going to use that situation to confirm your faith, because that is what you believe. I still don't understand what the exact math is, but I'm sure
you're getting into self-fulfilling prophecies, and that could be a potential outcome of theory of planned behavior. It's like, if you have faith, you will see it through, and if you don't have faith, you won't see it through. Like there's a certain amount
Which
of
isn't
like
just about religion. That's about like anything.
There's a certain amount of of self-fulfilling prophecy, which I think is interesting talking about this too, because it's like, if a group of people believe in a good outcome for something, does that potentially push it in a good direction?
Man.
Even just their beliefs about that.
And now we're talking about like manifesting energy and enough people.
Oh
Like,
God, TikTok.
Oh
Right.
gosh, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm just saying that my original reaction to stuff like that would have been to freak out about my car. Back earlier in my life,
Right.
I wouldn't have even thought about the other situation. My entire thing would be like, great, this is going to cost a fortune.
No, that's because your perception has changed, though.
But I just don't understand how they can mathematically determine whether my perception has changed.
Because life is a simulation. Okay.
Moving on. We're in the Matrix.
Moving on.